Most media are in the pocket of the government these days, unlike the rebel. And so they know their bread is not buttered on the side where they ask Mark Carney tough questions. Yeah. But it's just essential. I mean, these are big issues. This showdown in the Middle East is one of the defining issues of our time. It will be a question: where were you when the Jews were fighting for their survival in their ancestral homeland? And if the answer is we were telling silly lies while undermining them in ineffectual ways, this is not what you want in your epitaph.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful future. I spoke today with President Abbas at length to reaffirm his commitment. Canada reiterates that Hamas must immediately release all hostages taken in the horrific terrorist attack of October 7th, that Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine. Canada will always steadfastly support Israel's existence as an independent state in the Middle East, living in peace and security. Any path to lasting peace for Israel also requires a viable and stable Palestinian state, and one that recognizes Israel's inalienable right to security and peace.
A lot of talk about Palestinian commitments. A commitment is a fancy way of saying a promise. So Mahmoud Abbas, who is now the president of the West Bank, the leader of the PLO, he has committed to bring in democratic reforms. He is now in the 20th year of his 4-year term. And of course, Hamas did actually win an election in Gaza, just once, mind you, because they never had an election again. Joining us now to talk about this is someone who actually went to Israel with me 20 years ago, right as Israel was extracting all remaining Jews from Gaza. There was a small number of farmers who lived in Gaza, typically greenhouses making fruit and vegetables. The Israeli government commanded them out, dug up their families' graves and reburied them in Israel proper. And we were there during that very momentous time. That was hoped that removing all the Jews from Gaza would allow that land to become a proto-state. Of course, it was just turned into a launch pad for terrorism. Joining us now is John Robson, historian, journalist, and a good egg. John, great to see you again.
It's good to be with you. And yes, that was a memorable trip, one of the highlights of my professional life, in fact. Can't believe it was 20 years ago, but there you are.
Well, tell me what you recall. We obviously did not go into Gaza itself, but I mean, the idea of Israeli military going in and physically dragging the last Jews out of Gaza so they could say, here, it's yours. No more Israeli soldiers, no more Israeli citizens. That is your Palestine. That was an enormous failure. It's almost as if Mark Carney doesn't know that was already tried.
Yes, if we wanted to make a list of all the things Mark Carney didn't know, we'd be here all night. But one of the things I remember vividly is that in Israel, because it's the only democracy in the Middle East, it's the only open society, there was a very lively debate about this pullout. And it was done by Ariel Sharon, who had a reputation as a right-winger. But the debate essentially went like this. Some people said, look, if we pull out of Gaza, they're going to turn it into a terror statelet, and we will have no end of nightmares, rockets on Ashdod and Ashkelon. And other people said, what else can we do? We can't make peace with these people. We can't negotiate with them. No promise they make us any good. We can't stay in there. It corrupts our own values. We need to pull out, give it to them, hope for the best, and build a wall. So people who think that Israel is acting recklessly or brutally or thoughtlessly, they have no idea the depth of debate and consideration that has gone on, and they don't seem to grasp that the fundamental reason this debate is so frustrating is there's no partner for peace on the other side. Yeah. That Hamas wants, as you said, right, it's not just about Israel, it's about Jews. It is about killing all the Jews. Kill all the Jews in Israel, kill all the Jews elsewhere, Allah will reward you. That's actually what they think, and it's what they say they think. And if our politicians would just take seriously the notion that people believe their beliefs, we would be in a much greater situation of clarity. But of course, one of the problems here, when you're showing what Mark Carney is saying, one of the problems is that Carney himself just lies all the time. So when he says that he believes that Mahmoud Abbas is going to hold elections that Hamas won't be in, it's very difficult to tell whether he actually believes that Abbas is going to do this, in which case he is, of course, an idiot, or whether he's just saying it because it gives him cover for doing something. And where are the journalists saying, okay, if they don't hold those elections, or if they hold them but Hamas is allowed to run, will you withdraw recognition? Nobody asks him the tough questions, and if they did, he'd probably walk away. He doesn't seem to enjoy being challenged. But when you're listening to his statement, the number of lies that he told, including Canada will always stand with Israel. We're not standing with Israel now. Yeah. You get these people saying, we need to impose an arms embargo, and not even knowing that we don't sell Israel weapons, which we certainly should if we had any. But with Carney, the whole performance, it's one thing to say a lot of what he said is stupid, a lot of what he said is wicked, but it's another thing to say, but there's no way of telling how much of it, if any of it, was sincere.
Right. He said things like Hamas must disarm and must not have any role. Okay, that's a statement of what should happen, but what happens if it doesn't happen? And Hamas has repeatedly refused to lay down arms. So it's almost like he's daydreaming or wishing. I say again, it makes no sense as foreign policy. It's only about domestic policy. But to be taken seriously, why? Just because Mark Carney in Canada, who no one thinks, what would Mark Carney do? No one who's trying to solve things in the Middle East says, well, what does Canada think? If we ever had such a position, I think 30 years ago, we had a conceit that we were honest brokers. I don't think anyone even regards Canada. Justin Trudeau burnt up so much money and political capital, and he couldn't get on the Security Council of the UN. No one takes Canada seriously as a diplomatic, military, or security force anymore. Hamas must do this. Abbas must do this. He's committed to it. It feels so childish, but here's what's interesting about it is it's the kind of thing Justin Trudeau probably would have said and done, but Justin Trudeau did not have Donald Trump. Trump came in just as Trudeau was going out, really. And Trump is redoing all his trade deals. And I don't understand all of it, frankly, but I see a lot of tough bargaining and countries saying they'll invest in America and they'll still pay tariffs to America. I don't understand it, to be honest, because I don't get the economics behind it. But almost immediately after Mark Carney made his statement, Donald Trump put a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, saying he was shocked by this. He clearly wasn't briefed in advance, and it's going to put a trade deal with Canada in jeopardy. And you might say, well, what has this got to do with trade? Well, nothing is the short answer, but the larger answer is, are you actually working against America's foreign policy plans? And if so, if Canada is trying to muck up Donald Trump's big plan for Gaza, why should Donald Trump concede the American market to Canadians? That's how Trump thinks. Someone else would say, well, you're doing it because economically it makes sense to trade with anyone. Free trade makes sense. But Donald Trump is more a fair trader than a free trader. What do you think of that, John?
It's certainly predictable that this announcement would have annoyed the United States. And since the job of the prime minister in foreign policy primarily is to safeguard our national interest, that was a good reason not to do it. Now, in fairness to Carney, in terms of negotiating with Donald Trump, it's a difficult thing to do because I'm not a big Trump fan. I think he doesn't understand the economics. And I also find that his position changes from moment to moment. Nevertheless, and I'm also just a unilateral free trader, what we need to do is lower our own tariffs, get rid of supply marketing, and so on. But since his job is to safeguard our national interests, and our far and away our most important relationship with is with the United States, even if it were in our national interest to side with the Jew haters on other grounds, we'd want to think 2 or 3 times about it because of this aspect. But of course, it's not. So the whole thing, it's just compounding the idiocy. And again, with Carney, because, as I said, and we just need to use words plainly, he lies a lot, right? Elbows up. He was going to go and, wallop Donald Trump, bam, bam, bam. And then he went down and groveled. Didn't work all that well. But when now you think he's going to stick his finger in Trump's eye over the Middle East, he may not recognize them, because you really can't believe anything he says. But what it does do is leave a bad taste in people's mouths. And as you said, we've had this strange notion that the world was just waiting to hear what we had to say. And in point of fact, I think for a long time, when they hear that Canada's on the phone, they go, I guess we better talk to him. But this is going to be 15 minutes I'll never get back. And again, and that thing about must, I have a peeve about this. A lot of people in Canada put out press releases, the government must do this or so-and-so must do that. And what they mean is, I wish they would do it, but they're not going to do it. They certainly are not in a position where they must do it. And here again, and in foreign policy particularly, you always have to remember the Buster Scruggs question. And if and I don't, because we say Hamas must disarm, and Hamas goes, no, actually, we're mad killers who live for death. So we're not doing that, whoever you are. And then, does it mean we won't recognize Palestine? Because if not, you see, that's the funny thing. When Carney says Hamas must disarm, it's a double lie. In the first place, Hamas doesn't need to do any such thing and aren't going to. But also, we are not then going to change our policy based on the fact that they didn't do something we said that they had to. So every word out of his mouth is deceit layered on deceit. It's extraordinary how Carney is the kind of guy who can say something meaningless and have it still be untrue. But this, where he said Hamas must disarm, that is a double falsehood. And he's up there, Hamas must disarm, blah, 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 blah. These people sound like trombones. But we shouldn't tolerate it, not from him, not from anybody. We should not allow politicians to tell a string of sententious lies and act as though something solid had been said. And as you know, and I get the fundraising calls, most media are in the pocket of the government these days, unlike the Rebel. And so they know their bread is not buttered on the side where they ask Mark Carney tough questions. Yeah. But it's just essential. I mean, these are big issues. This showdown in the Middle East is one of the defining issues of our time. It will be a question, where were you when the Jews were fighting for their survival in their ancestral homeland? And if the answer is we were telling silly lies while undermining them in ineffectual ways, this is not what you want in your epitaph.